with the National Renewable Energy Lab out of Golden, Colorado, the only Department of Energy lab dedicated to energy efficiency and renewable energy. And my luck today is not good with technology. It looks like, there it goes. I wanted to give a quick introduction to why the Department of Energy is interested in this area of self-driving cars. There it's working. About 5 years ago, the Department of Energy began to get interested in this concept. Now, it's not that they haven't been paying attention to transportation. Much of their work over the past few decades has been in alternative fuels, battery electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, powertrain efficiencies. But when they saw the headlines of what then Google was doing and then everyone else jumping in, they said, hey, wait a minute, the nature of transportation may be changing and changing rapidly, and if so, our projections of petroleum use, GHG emissions in this sector may change and change rapidly. So they became involved in several of the automated vehicle forums, began to discuss, and about 3 years ago they put together a program to take a look at mobility systems, modeling the way people, particularly in urban areas, move and access goods, services, and employment, saying, hey, if this changes and changes rapidly, it's going to impact the energy issues in the U.S. The U.S. population is growing and aging. The population density is increasing. 75% of the population lives in urban mega regions. The urban theme is quite large. My background in surface transportation and roadways, several decades ago we solved the inner city problem with the interstate highway system, and now the burden of the problem is moving people in and about our cities. Technologies and fuel choices are expanding. They're definitely in the scene with respect to fuels, battery electric vehicles. They watch that quite closely, see the adoption rate, see the infrastructure that's needed to augment our current petroleum system. And try to interdict and help urban areas prepare for what they see is a growing battery electric vehicle fleet. Transportation costs are high, second only to housing expenses. And this is a pressure. I really appreciated the presentation yesterday on demographics, how things are changing with the new generations. And this is one of the price pressures with respect to income. Our current car culture is getting excessively expensive for these new people coming out of college. All these pressures are acting on it. The DOE responded and said, hey, we need to pay attention. They acknowledge the disruptions that are going on, all the ACES activities. I'm not going to go into detail with those. They have a 5-lab consortium, of which my lab is a part, and we're looking into all these areas. Urban science, I want to highlight there. That's the area that I'm working in. But all of them working together as a mobility system moving forward, and ultimately, what is the energy impact? You may have heard a study. This had quite a few legs. The potential impacts in the energy realm associated with all of these technologies, connected automated vehicles. If you play it out for 30 years and take a look at how is this going to affect the energy needs in surface transportation, they put this study together, could say anywhere from a reduction of up to 60% to almost tripling. And if you look at those factors, are we going to get to EVs? Are we going to have more sharing and higher occupancy? There's going to be a heck of a lot more travel because there's a sector of our society now that can't participate in the car culture, and we may enable them. All these things put together, they tried to put kind of a back of the envelope bracket, what is the possibilities? And this got the attention of the DOE saying, hey, what are the leverage points? Where are the decision points that's going to swing it from that -60 to that +200, and is there work we can do to influence it towards more sustainability? So if you see the DOE participating in these talks, think this slide of what's in their back of their head and why they're doing that. With the next few slides, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to what we're doing in that urban science sector. And the one particularly to this is automated mobility districts. We started down this road in about 18 months ago. At the popular literature at the time, I think it was Dick Bishop coming out of the DC area, said something everywhere or everything. So I forget what it is. Basically, are we going to keep evolving our automobile fleet to get more and more automated? Are we going to have pockets where everything gets automated, kind of as an automated mobility district service, and that's what we pursued. We put together this graphic. Imagine a city. The red there is like the central business district. If you go and access that, there's a system that takes you everywhere. All you have to do is the perimeter. In the lower left, imagine that as a major state university campus that highly discourages you from driving there by putting either eliminating parking or pricing it very expensive, and maybe a business park there in purple. All of these places have a mobility system that's automated, maybe one of these automated electric shuttle systems or a first generation ATN. We're working with Greenville. Fred has incredible success getting funding to put these in. He has it in 3 districts, and we're using the Greenville system as a first case study. We're developing a toolkit to model these automated mobility systems, both for the behavioral impact, how people are going to ride them, and ultimately the energy impact they're going to have both within the district and as these would appear throughout the metropolitan area and to get interlinked with an interregional transportation system, the larger impact that they could have on the overall region. And that includes not only a dedicated AMD, but as you get in the urban regions, the pedestrian, the cycling, and all the other issues that are currently being discussed related to that. The last thing I wanted to share is metrics. The DOE, if you look at their goals, are highly driven. They want to reduce the cost of batteries by 50% over a 20-year time frame with new technology. Well, they came on this area that we're calling energy efficient mobility systems, and they said we do not have a metric system to appropriately set goals. We can count the energy, we can count the gasoline, gallons of gasoline equivalent or the BTUs, but it doesn't really speak to what we're trying to get to. They put out a tagline about 12 months ago, maximize mobility while minimizing energy. We latched onto that at NREL. Says, hey, we know how to measure energy. We fundamentally have a hard time measuring mobility. And we define mobility as the quality of a network or system to connect people to goods, services, and employment that define a high quality of life. And then we started down that path of how would we do that. Ultimately, it came back to some of the concepts in what we call accessibility theory. What we do is we take a look across all modes, how all people travel, and we take a look at what services they can access in a set amount of time. They call these technically isochrones. Basically, if you have 10 minutes to travel, how far can you get? And it says like, well, if you're in the middle of Kansas and you have 10 minutes to travel, you can go pretty much at least 10 miles in all directions, but there's not a whole lot of services. So we integrate those isochrones across the land use data for all the types of services, goods that you could access. We apply energy efficiency weighting measures to it. We apply cost affordability measures to it. And then we also weight it by the travel demand data. How often do you go to work versus how often you need to access medical facilities or religious centers, things like that. And we combine it all into a holistic metric that tries to put an attempt on this quality of mobility. And then we're working with the DOE saying, they came to the table and says, you know, it's not that we want to reduce the energy in transportation sector. They would like to do that, but as long as the benefits in mobility are proportionally greater than the extra energy we put in, that's what we call the productivity part. That's fine with us, but we need a framework to measure it. If you're familiar with isochrones, this is one that's put out by HERE Corporation. You might recognize Washington, D.C., and at the very center is the White House. And then if you have successfully more time to travel, 15, 30, 45, and 60, you can reach greater and greater. I've been using this, and I didn't notice it, but the little red splotch right out to the west, the left, that's Dulles Airport. And it appears that way simply because if they have that toll expressway that you hop on there, you can't get off until you get to the airport. And that's why it kind of appears as an island out in the middle of nowhere. When you put all these together, we can create heat maps. We're still struggling with the exact metrics. We're still struggling with the weighting coefficients. But the basic framework of how you put this together is creating the lens that the DOE is going to be looking at this through. One of the early successes we had with that, we employed an intern from one one of the local colleges, really bright kid who happens to be legally blind, can't drive. And boy, did he open our eyes. And he's taken this metric and he's turning it every which way. One of the things we did, saying what is the contrast if you can own and operate an automobile versus the contrast of all the other modes that he has access to, but he can't drive because he's legally blind. And we lit it up this way. This is an example plot of what the downtown Columbus, Ohio region would look like. The left being if you had the richness of this accessibility metric if you can drive, versus the right where you would need to live to have similar access to goods, services, and employment. That's a broad overview of where we're headed. We sure enjoy working with Fred down in Greenville to make the AMD's concept work, and talking to many of you on the broad base of energy, how we get electrification into this, and how do we measure the impacts. So thank you.